Hello, everybody. Welcome to this third online masterclass of Antigone's Pride project, which closes this second round of online masterclasses. Antigone's Pride project is a project supported by the Creative Europe program of the European Union, promoted by Astragali Teatro, in partnership with the Grotowski Institute, Foundation of Dance Alicia Alonso of the University of Madrid, Rey Juan Carlos, Teatro Zakynthos, and Augmented and Virtual Reality Lab of the University of Salento. I will shortly speak about the project before starting this masterclass. The project is focused on the realization of 3 EcoArts residencies in Spain, in Poland, and in Italy. We have just finished the first residence with an international group of artists in L'Alberg and Salamanca in Spain, where we had the possibility to realize several EcoArts activities and where we had the opportunity to work on the first presentation of the joint multilingual and site-specific performance Canti Antigone, directed by Fabio Tolledi, with the presence of artists coming from various countries. So the next step of the project will lead us in Poland and in particular in Brzezinka and in Wrocław, where the activities will be coordinated by the Grotowski Institute. We will have the privilege to work in the legendary residence where Grotowski worked in the forest of Brzezinka, and then in Nagrobli studio in Wrocław. And in Poland, we will work on this second step of the performance Antigone's Pride that will be played as well as it was in Spain in a natural space, in a natural environment, so in site-specific mode. It will be played on the 16th of June at 9:30. Information will come soon for the people in Wrocław who could watch the performance. After the performance, there will be another important initiative, which is a symposium on theater and conflict that will be held on the 17th and 18th of June. The title of the symposium is Saving Hope, Theatrical Artivism in Spaces of Conflict. It will gather artists from various parts of the world and to hear from them how they strive for freedom of expression and human rights using theatrical tools in places of conflict. So a very important challenge also is waiting for us, and we thank very much the Grotowski Institute for the coordination of this second residence, and this masterclass is somehow paved the way to this second phase of the project. And very grateful to Jaroslaw Siekowski for making the connection with our esteemed speaker of this masterclass, Professor Miroslaw Kocur. I will make a short presentation of Professor Kocur, Professor of Performing Arts and Theatre Anthropology at the University of Wrocław, and the Professor of Acting and Directing at the Stanisław Wyspiański National Academy of Theatre Arts. During the 70s, he participated in Jerzy Grotowski paratheatrical projects and his Theatre of Sources activities. In 1984, he graduated from the Faculty of Theatre Directing, where he took classes with Tadeusz Kantor and Andrzej Wajda. Later, he served as artistic director of the Second Studio of Wrocław, a company established in place of the laboratory theatre after Grotowski left Poland. In 1999, Professor Kocur received a PhD in literature. He has made significant contributions to performing studies and the advancement of theatre education. His research, based on his rich theatrical experience and inspired by Grotowski's Anthropology, focuses on reconstructing the origins of performing practices and on performance as research. He also studies modern acting techniques and travels extensively to research cultural performances in Asia and Africa. He has been directing since 1986. He has published many books on theater, and his last one is a bilingual publication on impulses, mapping the new puppet theater, edited in 2022. And he's also chief editor of the series Interdisciplinary Studies in Performance at Peter Lang Publishing House. So a very important background of Professor Kocur, and I'm very pleased to give you the floor for your masterclass, whose title is From Ecological Paratheatre to the Theatre of Sources. Welcome to Professor Kocur. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you invited me to do this presentation. I do my best. So now I share the screen, and I hope you can see the presentation. You should see my name and the title actually it's from Ecological, but I just skipped the Ecological, from Paratheatre to the Theatre of Sources. So main problem is ecological term that was introduced by Grotowski in the 70s. But the whole point of introducing the ecological term has its roots a little bit earlier. And just to explain to you who was this Grotowski at the time, late 60s, I will talk a little bit about his last performance. You can see Grotowski on the left. He was exactly like the party member, kind of official clerk of the government. He was very similar to all these party members. So that's how he looked. And so for 3 years, they used to work on this last performance. It is called in Latin Apocalypsis Cum Figuris. It is, of course, based on the series of drawings and graphics by Albert Dürer, and is based on many, many different resources. As you can see, 2 different openings. One was closed because this is the communistic time in Poland. And so everybody in the theater had to be a member of the Communistic Party. Grotowski, when he started his work in theater, when he started his study, he was joining the party, of course, because nobody at the time could do theater, especially in the 50s and the 60s, who was outside of the system. So he was a part of the system. And there is, even still today, there is discussion. Was he believing in this communist, or was he only using this? Of course, in later stages of his life, he was using this. Nevertheless, he himself was extremely religious, metaphysical person, and his main area of interest outside of theater was anthropology. So he was researching different traditions of rituals, of ritual practices, not only theatrical practices. And so all this was kind of implemented in this last performance. He was working on this performance not all day, all night, but basically for 3 years. And they just collected many hours of improvisations. And actually, in the last stage of the work, they were focusing on the Gospels, just regular reading of the Gospels and using the Gospel as a starting point to improvise. The whole point of Grotowski was to introduce new approach to acting. Acting is not a pretense. It's not to pretend to be another person. It's not to imitate. It's not to be just a clown. This is very important, that the source of Grotowski and many people from his generation was Polish Romanticism. Romanticism, I mean 19th century poetry, which was just like the substitute for national existence. Poland during the 19th century was not existing as the state. It was partitioned by the huge military and economical powers. So we had the country, our homeland was taken from us. In some parts of Poland, the Polish language was forbidden. So the poetry was the only place that we could inhabit our Polish identity. That's why this romantic idea that artist is not to entertain, but artist's mission is to bring the truth, to testify that the truth was something that we were doing into theater much more often than to entertain people. And Grotowski, when he started his career just after the war, again, disaster, Polish was on the brink of total collapse. So his theater was to be a serious adventure, to kind of struggle for Polish identity. And so in his theater performances, he was struggling with the most important values. And for Polish Catholic country, of course, one of these most important ideas was the person of the Jesus who was bringing Christianity many hundred years ago. And so when Grotowski started as a communist, he was mocking Christian faith. And in his early performances, Jesus was kind of a clownish character. He was doing kind of parody of the last crucifixion. But in the last performances, especially Constant Prince and Apocalypse, he started to change the perspective, and he was really approaching this Polish Catholic religion seriously. Let's see what is holy today, what is sacred today. And part of this work on Apocalypse was done in Brzezinka, in the place that you are going to visit. So this place actually was bought by the theater, laboratory theater, to make a rehearsal space in this calm, natural environment. Grotowski actually was not using environment to influence his art. He was using environment as a kind of barrier, kind of firewall against the noise of civilization. So you must understand it's very different. Many people who are working with Grotowski, they rebelled against Grotowski because he was really totally immune for the environment. He was closing actors in a kind of cage, and he was experimenting inside this closed space with no awareness and ignoring the world outside. Of course, he was politically aware all this was present, but still for the rehearsal process, he would distance himself. And so this Brzezinka, this farm, this forest situation was to create for the actor very safe and comfortable environment for very radical experiments. This radical experiments was to introduce totally new idea of theater, theater which is not requiring anything outside the actor, only actors. Two people meet together as a theater for Grotowski. One is a performer and the second person is a spectator. When these two people meet, they both create this theatrical event. Today, we would say that they are both performing and they are both participating in the performative event. They were not using this word during this theater production era, but still the idea was very close. And so for making the actor not pretending, but testifying to the truth, you see this character in the middle, he is supposed to be our contemporary Jesus. They called him in the play simpleton. And so the stupid character who believes that the humanity could be justice, that the human people could be good, that we can be good to ourselves, that the relations between humans could be correct. So all that stuff that Christianity tried to introduce, all these values of Christianity, he is embodying. But in the modern world, this is just like this Dostoevsky's idiot. He is not taken seriously. And so this, you can see the first version of the performance. There is no stage, but there is still the seat for the audience. And in this first version of the performance, actors are using white costumes to differentiate the characters outside of the Jesus from the Jesus. Jesus was always black or half naked. And so this is the first version, but very early, Grotowski decided that this is too much, that he doesn't need any costume at all. And here you can see this final version where people are introduced to the empty space, And if you want to sit, you just go sit on the floor or you stand by the wall. It's your choice, but there is no seat for the audience. We all meet together in one common space. We look exactly the same. You see, this is one of the most important part of this performance, which is the meeting between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And so they just do something extremely erotic. This moment of kissing is just like the sexual intercourse, because the third actor, who is not visible in this image, is running. And when they just kiss and they do something like very powerful embracing, the guy who is running faster and faster, just to bring this association to the sexual intercourse. And when he falls down, the lady falls down just like after sex. So this kind of physicality was introduced to this performance. And so the actor was not this, for example, Richard Cieślak, who was doing this simpleton Jesus character, he was not trying to incorporate any tradition of interpretation of Jesus. Grotowski was always asking Cieślak, tell me or present me your own Jesus. Who is Jesus for you? So this whole acting became extremely intimate, extremely personal. You were supposed to give a testimony to your own truth. And so the actors were actually true believers in a way, something like this. When somebody was rejecting Jesus, he was also rejecting the faith. So the level of discussion of constructing this performance was very high. So the whole point was to create artistic substitute to the religious liturgy. These are communists who are very eager for metaphysical experiences. And what they find is the artistic way to kind of accelerate the inner vibration so much as to experience similar intensity of meeting with the invisible being as you can experience, for example, during the Mass or during the visit in the church liturgy or something like this. So is it possible to create sacred theater? And this acting of these people who are not pretending but testifying to their own personal truth actually was called by Grotowski holy acting. And so this is the last moment, the last performance when he actually accomplished this holy acting testimony with each person in the company. So in this performance, 6 persons actually are experiencing this new approach, you would say physical, but at the same time, extremely metaphysical, very mental, that you try to give your testimony to the characters. And so the text of this play was introduced at the end. There was not play, and the origin of this production were actually performances. These people, during the improvisation based on the Gospels, they improvised many situations which were rooted in the Bible, but still they were expressed with modern issues, with modern problems. So they translated this in kind of modern theater language. And after having this 18 hours, Grotowski just compacted all these materials to around 55 minutes of the production. So the main resource for the production was not the text, was the performance. And so this was revolutionizing the theater in the 20th century, in the late 20th century, that the performance is the origin of theater, not talking, not reading, not writing a drama, not drama itself. And only after the performance was ready, Grotowski introduced text. So he was using poets, he was using Dostoevsky, of course, because it was a main inspiration here. But still, the text would be introduced at the end for very particular and I would say even secondary reasons. The main source of the performance was this doings by the humans who try to testify with their acting, with their doings to their own personal truth. And so you can imagine the intensity of this production was amazing. This is the first time that in the theater, nobody would clap their hands. Something like this happened before, after Acropolis, by Grotowski's first revolutionary performance, but very famous. but sometimes people would clap after Acropolis. Here, never. The intensity of these experiences, where everybody was testifying to herself or himself, was so radical. And this is also the end of theater, because if you are working with actor on this kind of intensity, if the actor is using his own personal life in many parts of this production, actually Ryszard Cieślak was feeding himself, his artistic self was fed by his personal experiences. And after that, when Grotowski was rehearsing new production based on Gogol, Dead Souls, he had to interrupt because the actors explained to him, we did everything. We did our testimonies. So this is this ambiguity. You work with the actor to make the actor testify to the truth. And if this is your personal truth, actually, you use your personality, you use your identity for the character in the production. And so what else you have beside your own identity, beside your own body? And there was this moment when one of actors, during the rehearsal on the next production, was ready to jump from the 3rd floor down on the Wrocław Rynek to break his legs like the buto dancer would do, just to introduce new body and new identity that he could testify to. So you can imagine the intensity and imagine something like fanatism of this work. But on the other side, the power of these performances was life-changing. Many people, I was just at the time studying in Wrocław, so after our classes, we would just go to the theater, like today you are watching American series on TV, because there was a communist time, nothing else was. And this production, the intensity of production, was actually created in this forest that you are going to visit. And after Grotowski decided that there is nothing else for him to do theater, he is also one of this unique person in the world history of art that is so courageous that in the moment of climax, in the moment of the great success, this person is not repeating the success, because now he could make many apocalypses in many countries, just like many directors do today, for example. They do many staging of the same production in many different languages, and they are successful, of course, why not? But the moment he felt that this is something like the end of this road, of this particular road of theater as a testimony, he decided to go on. And this next stage was to resign from pre-structured event. Now everybody is actually a participant, the performer and the spectator. There is no difference. And this paratheatre was the idea to introduce this meeting on the deeper level than is it possible in a theater. Because sometimes after the production of Apocalypse or some other productions by Grotowski, he was accused by Polish critics that his actors are too perfect. And one very famous critic from Krakow, he would argue, we cannot identify with your perfect beings on the stage because they are so much better than we weak people are. And so this was very important for Grotowski, that maybe this was distantiating the artist from the spectator. This immersion into the world of art was impossible because the actor was too skillful, too perfect after these hours, years of rehearsal. So now we introduce totally new situation. And this is the time of a revolution all over the world. This alternative culture is introduced in Europe, in United States. You have this hippie movement, you have free speech movement. All this was kind of course, Woodstock, Isle of Wight Fest, this rock and roll revolution. All this was, of course, not present in Poland because Polish everyday base life was like this. We are fighting with this fucking communist, and this is Polish December, a revolution of Polish workers who tried to stop this cruel communistic rules. But of course, the military and the police was on the side of the government. So these rebels were beaten and ended up in jail. So this is Polish situation. but still this idea of Kant, revolution, alternative society, alternative culture was coming to us. So we would start, but of course, as you can see, in these very difficult circumstances that for your ideas, you can be beaten, you can be thrown to the prison. This makes you more radical. So you don't have time, and you don't have also time for entertaining. You are here to do something important, maybe to help people to survive, or maybe to help people to fight the system, which is so cruel and so unjust. And so the Grotowski transformed, as you can see, from this party member into the real hippie. He was, of course, doing many workshops. He was presenting his art and his performances all over the world. And at one meeting in Iran, actually, he came totally transformed. Now you can see new Grotowski, the hippie, and like that, with the beard and totally new look. And this is this new area, new time for Grotowski of introducing this post-hippie. Let's do together situation. We are the actors, we the directors, we the artists, we are people who prepare the meeting. But during the meeting, everybody is equal. And this is the place, the Brzezinka, the village, the forest is the place where some of these events did happen. Some of them happened in the city. So this time, Grotowski recognized the importance of the environment. And most important experiments, paratheatrical events, were actually organized in this Brzezinka. You can see on the left, Grotowski. This is the lake. You will see the lake. And we use the lake as a kind of shower. This is the water coming from the lake down. And so Grotowski went over there to take a shower. As you see, they're very, very simple conditions. And so we would prepare something over there to people, not to kind of act together something, but to experience. For example, you are invited, you come to this, they're having buses, they're driving you by buses here to this village. This is very close to Wrocław, around 40 minutes of drive. And you go into deep forest, inside you can eat something, and in the evening they take you to the special room space, for example, where you are purified by the weed. You have to take a shower in the weed. And so this kind of, but later you run in the forest and you are asked to drink the water from the root of the tree. And so this strange behavior, or you have to jump through the fire, or this natural activities were supposed to be the inspiration for creating new alternative society. So this is very much post-free movement, Polish version of this. You can see Grotowski on the left. A few years ago, he was bumpy, he was having beautiful belly, he was totally different character. So he was also experimenting with himself. And this is very characteristic for him, that before he introduced new exercise to the actors, he was exercising this exercise himself. So he first experimented on himself after he was just like this real scholar, like Newton, who was doing something with his eyes to test his eyes. And so this is the part of scientific research that was always accompanying Grotowski's theatrical researches. So even he called his theater the institute, the research institute of the acting method. And so this is, you will see in a few days how these buildings are looking today. They are in very good shape. This is the original shape. They were ruins. And so Grotowski, like Marat, here reading the book in the top. And so, as you see, very hippie-like person. And this is Cieślak, who was, this whole event, which is called Paratheatre, was also Grotowski rebellion against his theater company. In late 60s, he invited to Wrocław people from all over. After the performance, you were asked if you want to join new project by Grotowski. You stay after the performance we would talk to you, and maybe we will invite you for a 3-day session. And this 3-day session was here in Wrocław in Rynek. People were closed, around 100 people were closed with Grotowski for 3 days. They had some food, and Grotowski said only one sentence. Usually he was mute, he said nothing, but when they were asked just to be with him, and he was observing what they do. They were supposed to do something from themselves. And so some people were students of acting department, so they would act, they would sing, they would present music. So everybody in this first day was presenting something to Grotowski to be kind of enrolled in this new project. And of course, they were exhausted after a while. Some people started to break the wardrobe. There was beautiful furniture, very antique, ancient furniture. And it was the one time Grotowski said something, if you can save this furniture, I would be extremely grateful. And so they stopped. They didn't destroy this. But next they were doing some crazy things. And after these 3 days, he chose few people only. I don't remember now, 7 or 8 people. But imagine, you are one of the 100, and you are not chosen. Some people, young, this was mostly young people. All these people were on the brink of suicide. So we had to run after them to catch them from these ceilings where they were just like climbing on the roof of these huge buildings around the Wrocław Rynek. They were trying to jump. It was something like after the Kurt Cobain suicide in America, this kind of suicidal atmosphere, very crazy. And so this was the intensity. And with these people and this was one of these people, Teresa Nawrot. So he was starting to work with totally new people. Some of them had no acting experience at all, to create this new paratheatrical open events where everybody can participate on equal terms. And later, when he was sure that this new group of people, very young people, were ready, he took them to Brzezinka, and they met for the first time with the actors of Apocalypse, and they started to kind of design new structure of behavior for these new participants who are going to be invited. One of the closest collaborators at the time was the student of philology in Wrocław, Włodzimierz Staniewski. He later will be extremely important person in the recent Polish history of theater, because he is the founding father of Gardzienice Theater, the company which was created in rebel against Grotowski. This is the company who was very sensitive to environment. Staniewski's idea was, let's try to find new environment for theater and to use environment as something which would give birth to the theater. So let's listen to the people on the province, on the villages, on the far away villages from the cities. And so he was influenced by this Grotowski return to nature. But in terms of ecology, Staniewski was probably this real ecological revolutionary. And so Grotowski was keeping these events, like I told you, with some new people coming with new ideas. And so we were supposed to do some very bizarre things inside this forest, but everything was about running. Actually, the speaking was forbidden. We had to do something, but not to say, not to interpret, not to command, especially. And so this was actually, the end of this was disaster, because and this is something that, of course, Grotowski wrote himself also, that the absolute freedom ends up in a chaos, because this is only wishful thinking, that you are free, that you are not born in a culture. Each of us is born in a culture, is born in many stereotypes, cliches that we incorporate in our life. We are not aware of this. So this freedom means that we don't have any challenge. There is no direction to go on. There is no future. It's just like have a fun, do some kid stupid game job or something. And in this particular situation, your brain is in order to make you survive this whole strange event, your brain actually is based on your past experiences. So whatever you do, you are repeating yourself. So after, I'm just doing a huge shortcut because there were many, many different projects, just like night vigil. For 3 hours, we had to go in the night to a closed space and to do some strange exercise. Nobody knew before what's going on. The structure was being born during the doings. But after the 3 such a night vigils, I was very disappointed. Everything was the same. Even with new people, you were not challenged to do anything because there was not really challenge. There was just be together and, you know, make some rollings, make some running, make singing, wow, wow. How long you can do, how much you can take from your past, not much. So basically, this was a failure. And Grotowski returned to his very early fascination with rituals. And this time he was running with a very small group of people in the places where some ritual practices are still alive. Haiti, Nigeria, Białystok, this is the Polish northeast part, where the very interesting mixture of cultures survived. We have this old Slavic, Polish, or you would say Slavish religious churches over there. You have also Muslim people, Tatars, who are living over there because the Polish king many hundred years ago offered the soldiers from Turkey who helped people in a battle to win the battle to just settle down over there. And so we have 2 communities of Turkish people actually who are living there, and of course Polish Catholics. So there are villages in this Białystok region with 3 actually religious and 3 languages used. So he was kind of opening this action for this influence of this religious, different practical traditions. And he went to Mexico and to India, of course. And one of the main, this looks like a joke, but this was really true, that one of the very important sources for Grotowski at the time was Carlos Castaneda. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy. He was an anthropologist in Los Angeles. And for his PhD, he wrote a book, The Teachings of Don Juan. This was about the Mexican shaman who was doing some strange narcotic experiment with Carlos Castaneda. Carlos Castaneda was his student, and the book became extremely popular. Carlos Castaneda became the most mysterious person. Nobody could meet him. There's no interview with him. And so, and he wrote a series of books that he is the stupid Western student of this mysterious, very deep medicine man from Mexico who is introducing him to these hallucinogenic plants and some other demons and some other experiences that he could meet this invisible sphere realm of the divine spirits. And he was learning how to deal, how to kind of negotiate his own life with the spirit, this kind of stuff. So it became extremely interesting. And in this first book, he introduced the way of the warrior as the way of the man of knowledge. He was comparing this. And at the end of this book, just like in the regular scholar anthropological book, he introduced the model of the man of knowledge. And the whole point was here that after a very long work, after you learn a lot, you have to forget it. So as long as you still remember your skills, your knowledge, you are not ready to fight. The real fighter is forgetting. And for Grotowski, it became very interesting when he was working with actors also, that the moment you go to meet the spectator, you have to forget everything. You have to be fresh. You have to start from zero, this kind of stuff. And so this was also important for this theater of sources, where they would kind of research the still vivid, practical, religious practical, just like in this voodoo community in Haiti. And he would invite to Poland practitioners of this very mysterious and you would say cult of possession, actually. And these practitioners were invited to Poland. Grotowski paid for the trip, paid for the food, for accommodation in Poland. And the representatives from all these communities from all over the world who were doing this religious practice as kind of real events in their contemporary life. They were still acting and they were still efficient and they were still very powerful in their agency. So that's why he introduced these people. And the whole point of Grotowski was to test the efficacy of these rituals outside of the original context. Is it possible to experience so deep transformation, like in this cult of possession in Bengal, in India, or in Mexico? Is it possible to experience this also in Poland, in this forest? So these are the people who were invited by Grotowski. This is a person from India. This is the left is person from Mexico, the right boy is from India, and the girl is Polish girl, actually one of two Polish people who were introduced to this project Theater of Sources. And Magda later became translator and very important speaker for Grotowski. And so they would be transferred to this forest that is called Brzezinka that you are going to visit. And they would do something which was to repeat the original ritual from the native country in this new environment, very different from the original environment. And so we were introduced, we the people from Wrocław or some other cities were invited. This was a very, very close selection. They were talking to us for hours, doing interviews, because the whole point was to eliminate mentally unstable people, because this was very delicate, subtle work, that if somebody could be unstable mentally, this could be very bad for the whole project. This could be, and this could end up with injuries, because actually there is no protection here. You are open to many different actions. So this, if somebody would be aggressive and could start to beat you, this could end up with very, very hard injuries. So that's why it was very carefully selected, a group of people who was introduced here. And so unfortunately, there are no pictures of this. And so we were driven by bus here. And of course, a small group of people, the original priests, I would say priests or the leaders, they were ready. Each of them, after working a few days with Grotowski, prepared something from these visitors. And they were testing us. They were testing us with some strange movements around the trees. One guy from Mexico was experimenting with tree climbing. We had to climb the tree for many hours. But it was very funny, because you always was always think in your mind was this idea: is Grotowski watching me or not? What I'm doing is stupid. I'm just climbing the tree. But do I climb the tree for Grotowski? If this was kind of, I know, breaking of the trees, if you hear some noise from the forest, hey, Grotowski is watching. I don't see him, but he sees me. Your quality of doings would change. So we are just like this kind of strange puppets. I was very aggressively talking to Grotowski. Who you think we are for you? Are we just like experimental props? What are you doing this? Because I experienced here the materialization. I was, after a long talk with Grotowski decided for each of us special series of behaviors. And this was just like that. This behavior were just like guided by these leaders. And so each morning there was this list of us and the name of the leader who is in charge of me for 3 hours, for 5 hours. And I got this list. And one day I got this Indian person who was a future Brahmin. He was a son of the Brahmin, so he was educated to be a future Brahmin in India in this regular Hindu religion. And so he was introducing me to running. But I met him before because he had, I think, some names day or something. There was this celebration of him, and we were looking for vodka in Wrocław, very difficult to find. And so we got kind of familiarity among us. And when he started to run, and I asked him, listen, W, how long are we going to run? And he said, oh, probably 2 hours. I said, listen, we are friends now. We had some vodka together. Can I wait here? And when you go back, you just take me out because I really hate running. And he said, okay. And so he was running 2 hours. He took me back. So this was something that I was really very against. I was thinking that why should I do this? Because they never explained to me before what I'm going to do this here. And next, I was invited by this Polish guy. Grotowski gave me this new leader, Polish person, who was also like me, engineer. And so we started to walk very, very small in the, first was Columbia Gay, First was Columbia Gay, Jairo Cuesta. And Jairo Cuesta took us to the forest, and he was asking us to sit all night inside the forest. There was this small meadow inside of the forest, and he said to us just before the sunrise, it was raining, it was very late autumn, extremely cold, so we were frozen to death. But in the morning, he said to us just before the sunset, when there is extremely dark in Polish nature, please take your clothes off. And so you will dance in celebration of the sun, because if you are not dancing this morning, the sun will never rise. So we're this kind of, but of course, after this strange experience, we are not returning to the base. But his next idea was, now we don't go to eat something and drink tea, but now we are one more hour running on this huge meadow. And this time I was just having enough, and I sat down under the huge oak tree, and this was the moment that I was dematerialized. Suddenly I felt that there's nobody, and my body disappeared. I was just like something very, very light flying in the air. I have no idea how I ended up in this base where Grotowski was waiting for us. And so, this was the moment I started to question Grotowski. What's going on? Do you really understand? Because this was a very strong transformation, mental transformation, but still I can understand this. But so the answer of Grotowski was with Martin Buber, because there is this philosopher, a Jewish philosopher of philosophy of dialogue, which introduces this kind of idea that you can be in relation me, you, to the tree, to the object, to the animal, not only to the other person. And so this kind of strange thing. And another experience, after another very long, very slow movement, I was catching with my energy the leader in the just very small space, and I was totally unaware. I was in trance, and I was just standing with my back to the leader, and he was caught. He was aware that something bad happens. He couldn't move. I don't understand even today what really happened, but there was this kind of energetical cage, and he couldn't move. And only after few hours in the morning, some of the participants in this experiment decided that maybe it's not good, this experiment going on. So maybe we need Grotowski. And so he called Grotowski, and Grotowski with his hand was liberating this leader. And so this kind of very powerful, transformative experiences we just had in this theater of sources. So these are the images taken from the internet, because there are no images from the time of the Theater of Sources. And actually, Theater of Sources was the last project that Grotowski did in Poland, because on December 13th, 1981, martial law was introduced in Poland. So Polish government actually introduced the war to its own nation, and we were close by the militaries. We couldn't move from the city to city, from village to village. It was very, very hard time for us. And actually, Grotowski was one of the few intellectuals who were not imprisoned, but he was extremely afraid. And he was asking his American friends to help him to run away from Poland, martial law country, and they helped him. And because he was very high-rank communist, he had his connections, and so he decided to go in exile. And he returned a few times to Poland later just to have few meetings, to show a performance. But actually, most of his life was spent abroad, and very, very many years in United States when he was teaching at the universities. And later he was invited by the Italian people, very much in love with his work, to Italy. And he was having this separated building when he did this experiments with vibratory songs, which again is extremely ecological because he was working outside of the city, in the forest, in the kind of marginal natural situation, circumstances. And so this is actually the whole story about Brzezinka. And later, when Grotowski died, Brzezinka became something like the, I don't know, place. This was also his testimony. Please do not bury the theater laboratory building and the farm in Brzezinka. Let's use this for young people to do experiments. Let's make from this the live place for young artists. And so that's why this new company that is now actually working at the theater here in Wrocław, Grotowski Institute, they have many connections, and they invite and they do these projects like your project. So all this is exactly testimony to Grotowski. Use the place, use this building, use this farm for something creative. Don't make it die. And so my time is over, I think.
Thank you so much, Professor Kocur, for this charming storytelling about your participation in this experience with Grotowski. And thank you so much for letting us immerse into the world of Grotowski, as you could experience directly also in a part of his long path of research. We are very, very grateful to you. And now we can continue only in the Zoom so that we can make all the questions that I think we have about your experience and your studies also on Grotowski. So thanks really a lot for this great opportunity. Thank you to the Grotowski Institute and to Jaroslaw Stiekowski for inviting Professor Kocur. Thank you to Jaroslaw for his passion in the work he always puts in the work. And now I thank also the people who participated and followed on in live streaming. And now the participants in Zoom meeting, we can continue with Professor Kocur for questions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.